So my name is Jeremy Vanderloop. This is our CRES Chat with my friend Josh Weis. That's the proper way to say your last name.
It is, Weis with a W.
Weis with a W. And we are having a conversation today on how to start, buy, scale at a rapid pace and exit companies while trying to maintain who we are, like the essence of who we are and our priorities, being dads, being husbands, all of our 5 healths that we always talk about around here, our mental, emotional, physical relationships, and even our spiritual health, while excelling and scaling what most people would think is like an impossible achievement.
Yep.
And so give us a little bit of background. Now, no one's here, it's just me hanging out, drinking some water, having coffee, but what's your background? If you would brag on yourself, what would you say your accomplishments have been in life?
Yeah, I've been fortunate because I do believe I've had experiences that I never thought were possible. I didn't grow up with much, but worked hard and had some great opportunities. So today, as of today, actually I'm CEO of a company called Office Pride, which is private equity backed. Not to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but some folks I used to work with that we had a lot of success together aggressively attracted me over to a very large software and payments company. So I'll be shifting over to the CEO of that company. It's already a $1 billion company, and the goal is to grow it even further from there. But even before that, I do come from a lot of private equity investment background, meaning I've been an operator in their portfolio companies or portcos, and I've been able to learn their playbook, which definitely has a lot of organic and inorganic growth, inorganic being acquisition and scale, and have been a part of 2 separate $1 billion exits. The new role for me is likely going to be a 3rd, and I'm excited, but it's been in the software and payment space primarily.
So you're a serial multi-billion-dollar exiter.
That's one way to put it.
Yes, that's never going to put it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just glad you're my friend.
Yeah.
That's all I care about.
I love talking this stuff. A little bit on the personal front, happily married, that's important, especially as someone who has a high demand role. You got to have that partner.
Yeah.
And young kids who we pour into as much as we can and strategically juggle the family side of things too.
Yeah. It's so hard, right? I mean, it's both coming from, we have some friends that come from status, right? It's their 2nd, 3rd generation, and I love those guys.
Yep.
I've had them as guests here. But being a 1st generation guy is uniquely different. Would you agree?
Oh, it's been definitely different for me. I grew up in Tampa. I was a free lunch kid.
Yeah.
Literally, not even the discounted lunch. They looked at me like, "Oh, you're free lunch."
You're free.
I'm a free lunch kid.
Yeah.
Of course, they put a little extra on there for me when they knew that. But grew up in Tampa, in the tough parts of town. My dad gave me a shot. He said, "Son, I can't afford for you to go to college, but I know you love baseball. I'm going to get you somehow, some way in the Jesuit. I'm going to pay."
Wow.
Tampa Catholic's right down the street, our big rival.
Yeah.
And thankfully, his plan worked out. I was able to have a successful baseball career that turned into college scholarship,
Yeah.
which allowed me to get a finance degree and get into this type of career path.
Yeah, so both being like starters and really not coming from an affluent home life, right? Just blue collar, good people,
Yeah.
broke people,
Yeah.
right? Best way to describe
Oh yeah.
how both of us grew up. How do you think people get in? Like, how does this movement happen to get into where now you can say, man, I've been the CEO of a serial exiter of multi-billion-dollar companies?
Well, I think there's different ways to look at it because the entrepreneur is trying to build something that is theirs, right?
Yeah.
I've been able to act like an entrepreneur, treat the business as if I'm an entrepreneur, but I still have pretty big shareholders, private equity. But there's no doubt about it. It's hard work.
Yeah.
People love the idea of entrepreneurship and growing a business, but you really have to gut check yourself. Am I okay with what has to also come with it to make it happen? Because it's all on you, right?
Yeah. As the entrepreneur, as like the founder, the guy who's
the buck stops with you. You're hiring, you're firing, you're making strategic decisions, you're working in the business. And you have to work through those things and ultimately replace every bit of the org chart over time, which comes with investment and smart thinking. But over time, you're not going to scale unless you start to fill in those boxes in the org chart.
Yeah.
And then work more on the business.
Well, I'm like the glutton for punishment. It's like my 4th startup.
Yeah.
It's just like,
How do we do this? How do we? Serial startup.
Apparently. How do you go 3 years without a paycheck? I don't know. We just figure out and we just do it. You know, multiple times. And I think I was telling somebody that I was having a conversation yesterday. It's like, oh yeah, no, I won't get paid from this for like 5 years.
Right.
And they just go,
Yeah.
so it's like you're to like a high level of like almost insanity, like of just like glutton for that punishment as founders. A lot of people go in to start companies and they don't realize it's so much easier to buy companies if you can understand the system, because the systems are the same, except what I love about hanging out with guys like you is I can like really just replicate my knowledge.
Yep.
Because you're the operator once the founders get them established.
Yep.
And it's just hard because for me, I'm building a bridge where I'm driving on it, and you get to basically repave the bridge and drive really fast on it, which there's two different sides, but very similar giftings
Yep.
that come from that. And it's like my job is to create the company and find a guy like you to run it.
That's right.
And to keep creating more companies,
That's right.
And that's like literally how our giftings work.
Know your skill set,
You know?
know your giftings.
Yeah.
Some people are made to start from scratch. Some people are made to acquire and grow in that way.
Which is fun about this conversation because, like, I'm hoping one day I will put a guy like you in my seat and be like, cool, now please just blow this up into what it needs to be. But now I'll get it to the point and hopefully do it a lot faster than 30 years.
That's right.
It likes to do a lot faster. That's the power of private equity. So we have guys that are founders, and some people realize they think they might want to be founders, which is a cool thing on this conversation. And we can also give the spectrum like, you know what? Being a founder is uniquely different. You may not be gifted, but you might be gifted to be a buyer and a runner of a company. So let's talk about that. How does somebody from a founder position, so like what would be my steps of starting, getting the thing stable, polishing it up? How would I go about taking a company that I've started or buying a company and start scaling it? What's the intro point to getting into that rapid M&A world? Because for me personally, like that's my business plan for this new company is to really polish this thing up, great growth, great margins, and then get us all, EBITDA, and then raise 20, 30 million and then do M&As and buy other things. So like I'm personally interested, like next 4 years, how the heck am I going to do this? What's the roadmap?
Yeah, as with most things, people matter, which they do anyway, right? We want to be purpose-driven, people-focused leaders. I would describe myself as a culture-first, people-first type leader. So you have to get the right people on the right seats of the bus, going to the old Good to Great adage, which is a great read if you haven't read it. Jim Collins' Good to Great.
One of the top 5 books I always suggest.
Yeah, it's timeless. So, because you need people in the seats to focus on the acquisition strategy. It's not easy and it's time-consuming. So the way we look at it, there's multiple phases of a deal getting done.
Yeah.
And right now, I work with a private equity-backed company who did roughly 60 deals last year. That's a lot of deals, by the way. They're about a $7 billion fund. They have done 40 to 60 deals on average.
And let's define a deal. A deal is buying another company. That's
just buying another.
And doing what's called a roll-up, right, underneath your brand.
Yeah, there's all sorts of terms for it. It's a roll-up, it's a tuck-in, it's a bolt-on, versus a platform.
Yeah.
So they do a mix of buying platforms that they then look to add pieces to it, or the tuck-in. So we last year did a few bolt-on acquisitions that were very synergistic. The whole idea is synergy. All that really means is...
So tuck-in's the same thing as a roll-up?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Platforms are just, I'm buying like a stable, like define like what a platform, I don't mean to interrupt, but this is like good. Like,
so CRES is like a platform,
okay,
right? Yeah. You've built the model, you understand the growth plan. Your idea would be, let's go buy additional locations that I could tuck into my operating model and launch very quickly.
That we think has synergy with our culture and with our existing team.
Yep. You have a team in place. Yep. CRES is the platform. You just add these pieces to it over time.
Perfect.
In the software and payment space, right? In our case, the platform is the software. You then buy other pieces, other companies that are similar that literally can just be rolled into the operating model. Yeah. And you get synergy. You literally get 1 + 1 equals 5, 10, or 100. Yeah. And that's the beauty of these deals. But so we look at, there's 3 main phases. Deal sourcing. So you need a group that's going to out there cold calling, sending letters, reaching out to your target type seller and saying, we're interested in buying you. And then that generally creates some level of conversations. A lot, just so you know, as a stat, the current private equity group I looked at, they looked at 7,000 deals last year to close on 60. So it's a low margin, less than 1% type ratio. So don't get frustrated when people keep telling you no. because that is this.
So we could walk through. So that's like the key principle of being successful. You're going to hear a lot more no's.
Yeah.
Like why always say there's 90, like all the opportunities that come our way on the 80-20 rule of us as individuals, 95%, 80% of anything, any opportunity somebody else can do easily. Get them to do it.
Yeah.
15%, someone on our team with pay and compensation, we've talked about this before,
Yep.
they can do it. But that 5%, I'm trying to find that niche, that 5% that no one else will be able to do, and that's my yeses. And it's niching into these things just to identify those 7,000 basically no's,
Yep.
6,940 no's to get the 60 yeses.
Yeah. It's that hard of a game. So you have to stay disciplined. Don't get frustrated. I've seen deals where we talked to folks a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
They said no, and then they're calling us back.
Yeah.
So you have deal sourcing, which is just the idea of starting the conversation, doing some level of discovery. And then you have what we call deal execution. Once you negotiate some terms, you get to a letter of intent, LOI. You then have the whole deal execution process, which is where your financial due diligence, your other due diligence comes into play. That's where you're spending monies. And this is, I've learned this, not the hard way, thankfully, but I would highly recommend have a good attorney and have a good tax person or CPA on your side, because they're going to make that process much more efficient, even though you're spending money, but they will protect you from making a bad deal.
So much. Yeah, your team's everything.
Yeah. You make your money when you buy a deal. The best deal you've ever done is the one you didn't do because you might have messed up and blown yourself up. You need those folks in place to keep you protected. So deal sourcing, deal execution, and then there's the post-close. Some people call it post-merger integration, but that's where you then start to realize all the synergies that you needed or thought you were going to get through that acquisition. That's where the 1 + 1 = 100 and the whole execution side. So it hands off from a deal team getting that done to your operating team executing after the close.
So that's a good high level. And the cool thing about like how we work is I'll do really interesting real estate deals. You do these PE deals. They're honestly the exact same process.
Yeah.
It's just, and what I've always taught and talked about a lot is our energy is producing our income, right? We have this finite resource of time that everyone is given the same amount of time in a given day. And it's how efficient and effective am I at managing my energy of life, right? And my yeses and keeping my focus on what matters. And I think we can even bridge into that because I think so many people see some of these big deals, right? They'll see, oh, you know, we just had a deal blow up. And people don't see the deals that blow up that you put 3 years in. You know, just like $7 billion company, annual partner, and heavy amounts of liquidity. And they're numbers don't pencil. Deal's gone. 3 years of your life, right?
Yep.
That just happened 2 weeks ago. We're repivoting, you know, and it's just like you did those deals over and over and over again, and people don't see the back end. They just see when you close.
That's right.
You know, and our numbers are a lot different. We can look at 10 deals if we're good at it, and one will work.
Yeah.
So we got a 10% ratio. You guys have a 1% ratio, but the principles work really well. But it comes down into really this energy management and this focus of just like being a magnifying glass, right? Would you agree?
I do. Well, and you make up a good point. So that example I just gave of deal sourcing, deal execution, there's probably 7 to 8 different steps along both of those where a deal can die.
Yeah, you're trying to kill the deal.
Yeah.
I always say playing chess against the deal.
That's right.
And if I lose, the worst case scenario, it's like, dang, I lost. I had to make some money.
Right.
You know, it's like, I don't get emotional.
So those
about the
things
deal.
happen.
Yeah.
And it's hard work to do these. One thing I will say, ironically, is the bigger deals are generally easier than the smaller deals.
That would make sense because the guys that get bigger have the systems and infrastructures and the proper balance sheets, you know. But it's bridging. How do you bridge in from, because you can't just jump into big deals, right? You have to, I think bridging is absolutely the hardest. The first million in a company is the hardest. And so how do you bridge?
I think that's also just as important, right? Even though the smaller deals are harder, we always recommend, in the current role I'm in, we have 150 locations throughout 30 states. Some of our franchise owners, we have helped them do acquisitions. And our advice has always been, do a small deal first.
Yeah.
Just because if you're not living in the M&A world, this is completely foreign to you. And that's okay. Don't be intimidated by that. If you don't do this, it's a new thing. So start small. We'll help you with a playbook of how to get the deal done and then how to realize the synergies after the fact. essentially get one under your belt. And then next time do a bigger deal.
Yeah.
And it really is important to probably do a few deals before you really stack into something big, because a big deal could sink you.
We call it the crawl, walk, run
Yep.
model of business, right? And,
Yep.
and the thing is, especially when I talk to, because we have, here obviously in our club and community, we have people at every caliber, right? We have guys that are solos just starting, and we have guys that are large and have done like major deals, and have overseen we have one guy who saw the largest data migration of data in the history of the world, right? Who's a member here, and you think of that and you go, but what I've found by hanging out with all of these people is it's literally the same fundamentals.
That's right.
Executing. And what I found that it's less about the zeros and it's more understanding that at this time there's a probable percentage break of failure. And all I'm trying to do is identify failures as fast as possible.
That's right.
But if I rush, because you can grow yourself out of business, you can go too quickly. And there's that delicate dance of getting that courage, because at this point in time, I will lose 3%, right? And that's why the going slow versus going big is it's less about and this is a theory that I'm kind of like in my own life I've analyzed, and I have this whole concept of like the time that it takes to get this point of a startup.
Okay.
And it's like the first 2 years, you're like literally an infant, you're crawling, and you try to stand up and walk too soon, usually in your third year, and you get pummeled, and you're just trying to make sure it's not fatal. But I found that it's a percentage break, because I've started companies at different tier levels of economics, but the percentage at the same time is almost identical. Do I want that 3% hit at 100 grand, or I want it at 10 million?
Yeah.
Because I might not be able to recover from the 10 million, but I might be able to recover from the 100. And so that's like the principle is like, it's not if, it's when something fails, because the goal is to try to find the failure.
Yep.
Right?
We always
Let's
believe.
talk on that.
Yeah. So the whole notion of failing fast.
Yeah.
Someone told me that years ago in business, and I said, when you think of the time impact of things and the opportunity cost of time, failing fast really resonated with me. In M&A especially, you want to know as fast as humanly possible, is this a workable deal for me, or should I say no? And again, you're going to say no to a large majority of the deals because for whatever reason, whether valuation's off, it's not synergistic enough for you, it's not going to fit into your culture well. You want to say no to a deal if culture fits are not aligned. Absolutely. There's a lot of reasons to say no to a deal, but the key is to fail fast. We would rather a deal fail in the very top of funnel. We use a funnel approach just like sales and marketing folks do, versus after LOI and right before close, because by then we've spent $100,000 on legal. We spent a lot of time and energy. Mm-hmm. It's still okay that it failed before we closed if it was not the right deal, but you still want to fail fast. So you are trying to find those fail points.
Yeah, we have a feedback loop system that we've put in and we even celebrate the most beautiful failure award as a team. Like seriously, like we celebrate it. Like when we had a larger team, I was like, if you're asking me to do this for you, I hired you to be the expert in that, and you should be. Like, I want you to fail. And they're like, wait, are you serious? Like, yeah, stop bottlenecking our system. Yep. I want you to find the failure. You will get in trouble if you don't find a failure, to be honest with you, because it means you're not executing. Yep. You're stealing at that point in time from our momentum and our growth. And I think, for a lot of people, because we are totally different in revenue base. So, like, what we're not even talking about zeros, but our companies are aligned in so many systems, processes, and principle. Yep. And so I would say, like, how to get into this. It's if you're running as a solopreneur and even as like a light entrepreneur, sub $1 million, you're already into it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Right? You're already into it. Yep. It's just maybe you're being held back because you're going after perfectionism and you're not failing fast enough. Yep. You're not finding, in like our feedback loops that try, fail, retool, build, measure, learn. We have these 2 key feedback loops that we're constantly, and we're trying to identify daily failures. Which is like, which we met hanging out with Vern Harnish and all that stuff. Yeah. Those daily huddles, right? And like, so walk through how things change though. Like, what are the core position, right? The core principles of scaling a company versus the methods of applying those principles that change. Like, the rhythm I've learned from like Steven and some of these other guys that are good buddies is it's every 20% growth I'm experiencing in my company. Yeah. The systems I use, the method of applying, have to radically change to get me to that next rapid growth. So how do you handle it? How do you know when it's time to? So first off, let's jump on the first question, which what are those core fundamental principles that will make someone successful versus the core, if they ignore them, is like just a writing on the wall. They're going to just be utter failures.
Yeah,
like
I think
in a negative way.
even a little bit of understanding what you just said is probably core.
Yeah.
I've always seen in my experience, because I've probably been a part of 50 various acquisitions, and the whole approach to those was that was going to help whatever company or the combination of companies grow faster. But what you quickly learn is growth is not linear. It's not this straight line that people think and they're used to looking in textbooks. It's actually got these stall points that are more these periods of just resistance. It might be 500,000, it might be 1 million, but there's, to your point, there's definitely these stall points that are not linear, and just understanding where those are and being able to recognize, okay, I'm at that stall point. I either need to invest into my org, I need to invest into various pieces of technology. Obviously, AI is changing the game very quickly. When I think of content marketing, automation, and even just learning and mundane operations within a business, AI is literally changing the game.
Oh, it's absolutely
daily.
changing the game. Yeah, daily. Yeah.
Daily.
Yeah, we are loving it. I'll just say that. As a
And
startup.
so recognizing that it's going to be a stall point, these little kind of hiccups
knowing
along
that
the way.
the plateaus are coming.
Knowing that they're coming, and then getting the team rallied around it. Well, how do we break through this?
You know what I've learned to do too, because that was a pattern I realized, like scaling, doing these different companies. I would actually hit what I've called a force plateau. Because what I found is there's voices that always want you to go faster and burn out your engine, right? Because maybe you haven't sealed all the gaps yet. And so I have found, and so it's this intuition thing, but it's literally like building in that filtration system to know when things get inefficient, right? And you're just going, okay. And then also knowing that, okay, at this point in time, I'm hitting a force plateau. Basically, even if it doesn't naturally, and this is maybe what stalls me out, and so like correct me if I'm wrong on this, but a lot of times, like if I start getting massive momentum, my mind goes, hold on, pause, plateau that, analyze it, hit a force pause, because everyone's trying to dictate my growth now. And I want to make sure I'm hitting a controlled measurable, that I actually have the means to deliver on the demand that's coming at me.
Yeah.
How do you navigate those waters?
Well, as an entrepreneur or business owner, I've always believed you absolutely have to know and have confidence in where your business is heading 6 months from now, 12 months from now. I don't believe much beyond that, because I think way too much changes, and the speed of change is insane, and it's only going to continue to increase. So knowing 6 to 12 months out, but then with that, as you're growing and seeing things happen generally good, we should always have a healthy paranoia.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're describing of, hold on, I'm running the way I am now, but is that going to be okay for where I'm running 6 months from now? Or if I took the same operating model and I can run this out 6 months, is this still the right foundation? Is this the right technology? Is this the right team?
Can I deliver on this? Is this what I want to? Great, like real life example. This quarter, where I was offered 7 locations.
Wow.
To scale. I'm 2 years old. We had 110% net positive growth without marketing, and like built-in like attrition here at this company. It's like great growth, phenomenal growth, and you go, okay, we got to do that. We got to double that growth this year. And it's the idea for me. It's like, how do I do that? And we did that while laying off team members.
Wow.
We executed growth, and we dropped it down through what we're talking about, these systems, these strategies, driven in these new vehicles of technology that allows you to this expansive growth. But so much of like, I got almost like, because it's my 4th run at this, and I have this rhythm, like by between 2 and 3 years, the world around me is going to dictate my speed, because I got something. If I know it's hot, others are going to want to jump on now on that bell curve, right? And so early on in my career as a founder and starter, and what I think is so fascinating, we bridge this because I think these cycles run at different tier levels in revenue, not just at the founder's sub $1 million or sub 10 mil. And it was like, I found this as a filter now for me. When I have major fans starting to come in and offer opportunities, I have almost a hard stop on them. And I filter to see who's real, because if I did a hard stop on them, 8 of them fall off out of the 10. The 2 that stay on and they're willing to wait for me usually means that they actually have a little bit deeper insight on what they're trying. And so there's like these rhythms, but it's like I saw that come in January. It was like 1 week. We had like 5 in 1 week.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, this is stop. But the younger me would have been, let's go.
Oh, yeah.
And just like grind.
You're going, this is opportunity. I got to go capture it.
Yeah, and that's that scarcity. So how do you, like, because that is something that I really want to bridge in this conversation from, because we just were profitable like 7 months ago, which is great. I mean, it was progress over perfection. Like your brain always has this level. It's like, but I really want to do this. And you're like, but within the first year of a company to be profitable is still phenomenal, but it's those 10, 15 years of pain points of utter failures. So it's like that. I want people to see that this is not like, I just arrive at a multi-billion-dollar exit, right? It's like this starts on the fundamental level of zero, right? So like getting back into kind of controlling this narrative a little bit, because I'll ramble because I'm passionate about this, is like, what are the core, like the 3 to 5 core principles that every leader needs to pay attention to?
Yeah, well, just to reiterate, I think the idea, it's not linear. You're going to have these stall points, and it's okay. It's actually a part of more of a healthy growth model. With that, I would say the younger Jeremy and the younger Josh would say all growth is good.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, as I've learned, not all growth is good, right? You going and taking on those locations might feel good, whether a little shot to the ego or, hey, we've grown X amount. But if it tumbles your business over 6 to 12 months from now because you weren't ready for it, that's a bad decision, right? That's bad growth impacting your business long term. So we always try to say and get into this posture of neutral and say, all right, is this growth good or is this a distraction? And we have to really test that out. Sometimes it's modeling, sometimes it's intuition, sometimes it's just getting smart people in the room and kind of sharing what you see and let them speak to you. I've learned in settings like this where I've been talking about something and someone will just have a different perspective on it that I had not thought of. And it's really put a pause, and it was really the best decision, that little bit of advice. So that's the power of community.
Yeah.
But talking to folks around your ideas, people that...
This is a third one?
Yeah.
Making sure you're in community?
You got to be in community with people that also... again, healthy paranoia is good. My wife is the brakes. I'm the gas in the relationship, right? I do things, and she sometimes says, well, hold on, no. And there's a healthy amount of no. But I think you want to be in a community of big thinkers that will feed into good perspective. They won't tell you to go do a bad deal, but they also won't start with the default no position, don't do this.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people that aren't entrepreneurial or don't do big things, their default is no.
Not to try to plug
they
the
want the job,
but, you know.
Yeah, and you didn't ask me to do that, but it is.
No, it's true. It's the reason why I started this. Like, we had this, like, we would have hung out without CRES.
Right.
I don't need CRES. They do.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't need it. I already was successful.
Yep.
I shipwrecked everything else to do it because the power of what you just said.
Yeah.
Get the right people in the room. Like, it's so important because everyone else out there, man, when I was starting my career as a recording artist, the same people that were telling me I was an idiot, right, for starting and that I would never amount to anything, when I quit and pivoted at the top of my game, those same voices were telling me I'm an idiot for quitting.
Right. And
seriously.
Those are the people that are comfortable with the job.
And there's like 98% of population that's doing that. So
and I've recognized that's not a bad thing. They're just wired that way.
It's okay.
So get in the room with folks that are wired differently.
Yeah,
and
have that synergy, that energy of our thinking. But they're also not going to just be like parakeets and like celebrating, this is the...
Right.
Like, you got to have a good mixture of mentors, peers, and mentees in the room.
Yeah. Don't surround yourself with yes people. Folks that'll just challenge you, bring up perspective.
I love that.
But then the power community too. You know, I just got an update on a deal. Right, we're doing an M&A deal. We have a unique buy and resell in our model. Great relationship with a strong bank who just gave me an approval for that buyer. We achieved super strong synergy on that.
Yeah.
So think about it. We'll invest. Basically, we'll wash out our investment with the resale, and that'll add millions of dollars to our enterprise value, those deals. And
I'm going to break that down a little bit, what you just said, because I think that might go over some heads.
So it is a little unique because we're in the franchise space, but because of the multiples that valuations are measured on for our model versus the deals we're doing.
Multiples on your EBITDA.
That's right.
Yep.
So we can generally buy these, and I'll just maybe use example. We'll buy that for $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
We'll resell it for roughly $1 million. So our net purchase price is $0. In our model with our valuation.
Taxes.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah.
That is worth 3 to 4 million in enterprise value.
It's because it's a recurring based revenue as well. So all recurring based companies
That's right.
trade at a higher multiple than one-off acquisitions because of the cost of customer acquisition.
That's right. So that's
There's some
synergy,
meat right there, by the way.
or that's a creative, what we call just an accretive impact on the business.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we go do those all day long.
Yeah.
We're trying to do 12 a year.
That's why some of these fintech companies will trade at what, 15, 20
Oh, yeah.
multiple, right? Because the speed of clear communication and clear recurring revenue of critical mass, that the risk is so much lower because so it multiplies higher. Just like, and that's a unique difference between real estate and equity. But again, energy produces income, strategy produces wealth, and the two vehicles for strategic thinking, equity and assets. They actually run hand in hand.
And
right?
so what we did, I'll just high level, the company I came from was at 200 million. 8 months later, sold for 500 million. A year later, sold for 1.4 billion. And then later on, a few years later, we almost went public. COVID happened. And instead, we did a carve out of that business for almost 2 billion. But what we were doing is exactly what you're describing. We were buying companies at a 7 to 10x all day long, rolling them in. And our package deal sold at
because of your infrastructure,
That's
your
right.
system. Yep.
So all day long, buying them at 7 to 10x.
Hope you guys are taking notes on that, by the way. That's meat, dude.
And then the package was worth 18 times.
So the reason why that is because of the efficiency of your system and your focus of your energy.
It's that, and you want to be strategic around what you're adding. And in our case, the software world's maybe a little different, the idea of an ecosystem.
Yeah.
So the different pieces you might use, you're logging into different systems. By us acquiring all that and building into one was this single sign-on mindset. That was one ecosystem for all those products. So that gives you what we call these EBITDA pops. Right? So standalone, they're worth 8 times. Together, they're worth 15 times, 18 times.
That is what synergy is. I mean, synergy is literally in our name.
Yep.
Right? So, like, that's the whole principle. How you just define synergy is just, with 2 points running solo, one person, 1.1, right? But they share this energy of complementing each other's strengths and weaknesses, becoming this vertical integration, and now it becomes 100.
That's right.
So it's not normal math.
It's not normal math.
It gets a little fuzzy because it's like literally what CRES stands for. A lot of people don't know this is growing community relationships with energy through synergy. It's the whole background of this is what we're talking about. Is like, how do we create when this guy gets in the room with this guy? There's such energy that connects to those relationships of that social capital that now they just go on and create a healthy impact of 100 times.
That's right.
What they could do solo.
That's right.
Right, and that's basically the same principle.
And what I used to think, so I was a finance major and always loved data. I'm a very data-driven operator. I think you have to change your thinking. 99% of the world does think 1 + 1 = 2, and they don't play the puzzle or the math game that way.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, there's a big group of people, generally private equity and savvy investors. That's the only math they understand.
Yeah, that's how you generate a 3,000 to 4,000% return on deals and those type of things.
Right.
Is that okay? Yeah, if I could do this and I tune it this way and change this narrative and pair it with this need, then someone's going to pay me 4,000 times more than if I just sold it as a raw piece of metal, right?
That's right.
And that's the whole thing of like you scale these principles throughout. It's not industry based; it's principle based.
So a takeaway which I just thought of is, to me, scaling in a lot of ways is just figuring out that puzzle.
That's it. Yeah.
A lot of times we think, we have to scale the whole operating model, bring the right tech in, and that all helps. But you can scale a business through M&A in probably a much faster way. And at least in my career, the last 10 years especially, that's actually all I've done. That's all I've been a part of. These companies that said, we're not going to necessarily build the core and the foundation of these companies. They're already kind of there.
Yeah.
You can do the blocking and tackling to make that work. Just layer in the M&A part, and now you got a business worth 400%, 500% more than what you just bought it for 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's fascinating. So it's like the way to get in and the way to scale is almost like executing on these same principles, right, over and over and over, but you're trying to find the puzzle. So the way to scale is identify the puzzles and put that work together to complement each other. What's the negative of that? When you have to buy a company and have you ever gotten to this point where there's this company that you're acquiring, like, I only want 20% because if I can fill this 20%, it fills here, but I have to kill 80% of the rest of that company to make it actually efficient?
I've not had to actually get a deal done that looked at it that way, but there are deals we've said no to because it had that baggage with it.
So that type of baggage, that percentage is no. It's like, it's not worth the 20%.
It generally can kill a deal.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're acquiring tech debt, for example, if you want the customers, but you also, what we've done to, I guess, solve that is we hated the tech. We felt we had better software, more innovative software, better tech stack, but we love the customers.
You wanted the list. Yeah.
We were like, look, we're okay killing that tech and moving those customers over, migrating them to our
I guess
software.
that was like the in the
And so then
spirit
there's
of
a
my
win-win,
conversation, yeah.
right? The customer, even though no one likes change and sometimes migrations of customers can be a little painful, generally they're ecstatic after the fact because they're on a much better piece of technology, maybe even less expensive. That's right. And so, you might play that game where you're removing some of the pieces of the business because you have a better solution.
So, I mean, this is really good stuff. What's like one more? So, like the principles you have to identify and know that there are stall points. Those are healthy. Your plateaus are healthy when you feel like you're failing in your revenue growth, right? Because like those stall points are almost healthy points.
Yep.
Right. Not all growth is good growth, right, was the second one. And one of the questions as a filtration system, is this good or is it a distraction? And that is by far our daily question we ask here in our systems. And hey, you know what? And we even have a waiting room system. Like in our meeting, we're like, hey, that's a great idea. Let's park it over here.
Yep.
Right? And so eliminating distractions is everything because it's harnessing that focal point over and over and over again. And then you got to be in the community. You've got to be sharpening. You're only as good as the people you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
Right? And be in the room with high thinkers that are challenge you, but they don't start off with a negative mindset of the no. They analyze us and say this is a great idea.
Solvers.
But they're problem solvers, but they will then also go give you, like my BOA, we talk about having a BOA on your life, a board of advisors over your life. And I've been doing this since I was 23, 24 years old, that every major decision I would have a group of men that I respected I would call, and I set this rule up at 25. If all 5 of them agree, I'll do it. But if one does not sign off, the deal's done. I cannot do it.
That's powerful.
And that saved me so much because I just took all their pain and I was like, yo, let's, and they helped me. And that what I found by doing that too is that community of mentors and peers that I put in my life in my 20s. They all came, it was really just like a confirmation. If it was a good idea, they would all agree, but then each one would come with a different perspective of threat and risk. Like one of them was, if you do this, you'll be the first person I ever see do it because no one else has the self-control to actually execute this. With that wisdom, I knew that threat was there, so I tied my emotions out of it and said, this will be emotionally a trick, and I was the first person he ever saw actually execute it.
Wow.
But it was that wisdom that was like, man, I'm glad I had this system because I probably would have fallen into that trap, and it would have stalled me out. And
That's right.
What's a 4th or 5th one? Is there a 4th or 5th one?
So you and I took that trip and hung out with Vern Harnish
Yeah.
for a couple days, and he said something that really challenged me. He said a business owner, business leader should be spending roughly 75% of their time on the business strategy, not in the business. And I'm a get it done, like driving results, like serving the team and helping the team. So I get my hands in the business, roll the sleeves up, so to say. Yeah. So that challenged me because I was like, I'm not sure I totally agree with that. Yeah. But the more and more I unpacked it, I think he's right.
Okay.
And I think where this comes into play, especially growing through acquisition or, again, inorganic growth, is you have to be so smart and selective on these things and very, very strategic. Because if not, it sets you back.
Yeah.
Right? So the risk reward is real.
You buy one bad deal, it could really set you back.
It really can.
Yeah.
It could have a compound effect on the rest of your business. Just as good as the synergies could be, it could go the other way. I think you can do more than enough things to avoid that. But the idea of carving, so say you're just in these growth phases and you're in the business. If you really want to go do M&A, you need to pull yourself out and get very strategic. You have to make sure the team's in place to run the business, so that's a risk. You now are giving up some of the control for your team to run the business while you get much more strategic and look to execute growth this way.
100%. Yeah.
So, but it's a risk.
What I always talk about as a leader too is you have to one thing that'll kill growth is micromanagement of trying to get it at 100% of you. And in my position, when I scale people, because that's what I feel like I do. I'm in the people business. I'm a good people picker. And I love people. I'm passionate about people and who they are. And I know that every season has a cycle and has an end. And so for me, the right people on the bus during the right season, when that season changes, it's knowing when it changes and that it's not a surprise and then they get off the bus. What I found by being a good people picker is that they will usually, because we're looking at data daily, weekly, they actually plan their own exit. And everyone that I have let go, they've all gone and started their own companies, and we had 6 to 8 week ramp up to let them go. Wow. And they worked to the very last second and then more on the last day.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. No quiet quitting. And I was like, so how was I able to do that? Because I think it scales into the thousands of employees, because my friend Stephen Chadwell will talk about that. It's like we had a whole chat on how to develop and scale culture, right? And they've got 2,500 employees now, and they're just this amazing company that just have done this. And the concept behind that model is just the 80-20 rule of leadership, which is John Maxwell talks about this. And out the gate, when there's the first connection point, when I'm trying to bring on a team member, whether it's a contractor or a W-2, I always try to set clear expectations of the end in mind, what I'm trying to accomplish. And then I will do the first 10% with them strategically. And then I will tell them, guys, you have autonomy and freedom to figure this out, but this is kind of what I want it to shape like. And I'm just internally expecting it to be 80% of my perspective. And they have 20% of failure or success to play with. And then at the back end, we'll wrap up the last 10% together. Yeah. And then if it fails, I always take the blame and say, I'm so sorry, I did not communicate my desires properly. And even if I have, they'll usually say, no, you did, I messed up. So it's okay, well, how do I help you? How can I do better at communicating? And I found that clear line of intentionality of leadership saying, I want you to have full freedom, and I'm expecting you in the back of my mind, I hired you to do this job. You go, then I have this thing, it's like, okay, as long as I've given them the tools, 80%'s 100% to me. Right. If they get to 70%, it's still a win. But I don't know. What do you think of that? I mean, that's like at least a process that I have that I do when I'm trying to do effective leadership with people.
Well, when I think of leadership, I've just always learned you cannot communicate enough. Yeah. Just when you think you've emphasized it enough, the teams crave the direction, and they do want to go execute and do good work. So it could be a mix of this is what I expect with the end in mind. I love that. Obviously, very common principle, think with the end in mind, start with the end in mind. But then the idea of, this is where my servant leadership comes in, of I'm always available if you have a question. Yeah. Because communication is important, but what that really means is clarity. They always need clarity. How am I doing? Am I on track or off track? Yeah. So I have a very frequent cadence, the daily huddles.
Daily huddles do the same thing, yeah.
It's 8 minutes. Yep. What's gone well? Yeah. What's not going well? Here's a little look at some of our data, because we're very data-driven, and how can I help?
Yeah, I need to bring the data in the middle. Yeah. Ours are a little different. I start with gratitude. What's one thing you're grateful for? 30 seconds or less. Because someone who will not be named loves to flip his negative thing. He has to find a way to make it positive every morning. But Daniel, and then it's my brother, right? So now you got to start gratitude. Well, I'm grateful I had to do. So we have 30-second gratitude, and we have top 3 priorities. Nice. So what are your top 3s you're going to do today? And then we plan out our 90-90-60 time blocking based off of their dopamine levels, yada, yada, yada. All driven, the 90-90-60 blocking is all towards our goal. Yep. And then the busy work, the whirlwind of operations, fills in the other 50% of the day, right? And then we talk about where you stuck that I can help you with. Yep. And then it's, hey, what's your leading KPI? What did you do yesterday that was predictable and influenceable? There you go. You know, but I love your huddle. I need to that's my struggle though, is like, okay, how do I get these data points to fit into this? Because we do 15 minutes. Yeah. 15. Mine are 10, and they're stacked up, so folks know I have to be hyper focused because I know Josh is talking to so and so right after me. Yeah. How many people are in your huddles? One at a time, and I have 6 a morning. You do one-on-one. I do one-on-one. Yep. Wow. See, we were trying like the cell approach with up to 5. And that works too. Yeah. They're all very different in their functional role. So on the CEO level, you're doing one-on-one huddles with who?
My direct reports.
Okay.
Yeah, so director of M&A, CFO, COO.
So that's where the principle changes. So the method where I'm at is just getting with everyone together because it's team cohesiveness. And the method where you're at, the application of those daily cadence of data points, is individual because those guys are now getting the data points.
Yeah, well, and we have a whole nother model around the team together and aligning on.
Yeah.
We do OKRs.
Yeah, that's
right?
what we do.
So we're crystal clear on the overall objectives, how we feed into them, and who owns them.
And the results that are.
And we hit that in a different
Say
setting.
that again. So.
With the OKRs?
Yeah, because you got like a 3% different on mine. I want to try to apply.
So, well, our cadence is different. We set up separate meetings just for OKRs. So we know who owns it.
Yeah.
Every OKR has one owner. It might have people that support and also have impact on that OKR. But then, so who owns it? And for us, I didn't mention this, but what's the status? So kind of a red, yellow.
And how frequently are you
Once a
reporting
week.
on the OK? So
Once a week.
That's where so in our WBG meetings, we would then report on OK. But I love the idea because you're the owner. So we have that actually.
Yeah.
But you're just
And only
so
one
much
owner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
only
one
only
owner.
one head, only one chief.
One
That's
throat
right.
to choke is what I would say.
One throat to choke. Yeah.
You want clear ownership and clarity.
Yeah.
And we have some fun. So the one throat. One thing I haven't mentioned that I think is worth covering, because this is hard. It's more anecdotal and less tangible. When you're looking at deals and acquiring them into your fold, there is a difference between merger and acquisition.
Okay.
You only want to acquire. Don't merge. Merge is just, it's too much of a blend. That clarity I was just talking about gets lost in a lot of mergers. There's redundancy, who's doing what. You want to be the acquirer. But in that, I believe culture is the secret sauce in companies. In general, I think all products, all companies, whatever you have a service offering or anything, no matter what, with competition in the marketplace, it commoditizes for the most part your offering, which only leaves a few things to differentiate yourself. Maybe it's your level of service, but generally it's your culture. And so when you're looking at an acquisition, there are different profiling and different things to do to assess culture.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I've seen where deals have gone very, very bad is where there was a culture mismatch that no one even checked during due diligence.
Yep, 100%.
And then all of a sudden you're, kind of take the biblical approach of unequally yoked.
Yep.
You literally now have oil and water coming together, and all that synergy is now not even possible. So it failed before you started because you didn't look at how well will the cultures work together.
Yep.
So
would you just doing that, if you really wanted, would just do like an asset acquisition at that point in time?
asset versus stock. In general,
Yeah.
you're doing an asset purchase. That's what most deals are, but asset versus stock deals are the common deal structures. I highly prefer asset, but also talk to your lawyer because they will give you the best advice.
Yeah.
But either way, you don't want to acquire a deal if the culture is a mismatch. Like you literally want that to be a
Culture is
disqualifying criteria.
everything. Yeah, it's the first thing and the first in,
Yeah.
last out.
People don't talk about that as much because you can't put it to a
It's
spreadsheet.
soft. Yeah, it's a soft cost.
But it's real. I've seen deals go terribly wrong because of a culture
The
mismatch.
only way that I found to help with that is speed and accuracy, slowing down the deal to catch that. That's why, like, if you're trying to like get to know somebody, take them golfing. You can find out who the man is in that 4 hours, how they're handling conflict, if they're honest, if they're stressed. Because no one's good at golf. Even the pros suck, right? And
There you
so it's like this whole thing. Like, you can really find out a lot in those 4 hours of how, and that's why I think a lot of execs do golf and those type of things. Is it's a character check. Like,
Yeah.
how's this individual? But little things like that of just going slower, but not super slow, still swift and with speed, but with accuracy. And that's where you have to, and that's kind of where so many people will mix up. They try to be over accurate and they don't go fast enough. Or they're going way too fast, and accuracy, which is culture, does this fit?
Yep.
Doesn't mix, but their speed, because it's all hard numbers chasing cash.
Yep.
And that's the lure of these big deals.
That's
It's
right.
Money movements, and money moves, right? So, what happens? So when do you know when it's time to exit? It's just mathematical. At that point in time, when your numbers hit, you exit.
Well, I think there's two parts of that. One is if it's a retirement event or you're a serial entrepreneur, you have to truly know the impacts of that deal. There's a lot of deal structures. Ideally, you're getting all cash. Sometimes you have escrow holdback based on performance of the business. That's not the same as an earnout. Sometimes you have an earnout which says, hey, we're going to pay you $10 million today. You can maybe make $3 or $4 million in the next 12 to 24 months based on the business performance. That has to get factored in. Sometimes sellers prefer to even do a seller note so they can make 7% on some of their money. Maybe get $10 million at close, hold a seller note for $2 million at 8%. They're like, I'm not making 8%. So there's a lot of ways to get a deal done. So you have to know what the reason is for it. But I will say, and this isn't talked about as much, when you're ready to sell your business, you have to start thinking about that potentially years in advance.
At least 2 years, from what I understand.
At least, I would say, because value is derived on the business in multiple ways. But if they see that, and I'll use you as an example, if you're the face and the brand of the business, or you have key customer relationships, they're going to say, hold on, the business is at risk if Jeremy departs.
Yep.
Where you can set it up in a better way of having, you can almost move into a passive ownership model that's more behind the scenes, board related, where you're still maybe driving some synergy or strategic vision. But a business goes for much more value when they see they're getting a complete leadership team that's been there, done that, and that's going to move on to the next phase. You as a seller aren't moving on to the next phase. So if you're entrenched in a dependency in the business, that will devalue your business in a very
100%,
real way.
Yeah, your systems and your goal. And I love, Scott Bedell. Do you know Scott?
No.
He's a good guy. I like Scott. He's a member here. And he's like one of the top guys at Action Coach. And we have a very similar principle on this in regards to like what makes you like a real business owner.
Yep.
Most people don't have businesses. They have jobs, and they're really well-paying jobs. So you have your solopreneurs. You have your entrepreneurs, which is the guy who's the face. Everything funnels through him. He shows up and the business runs. And even some CEOs are that way too, these companies, right? They're just like, and then you have the business owner, which the business owner can leave his company for 6 months and never get a phone call.
That's right.
Right? You don't have a real company until you leave for 6 months and no one calls you.
Yep.
Because what really makes a company that's scalable and acquirable and that can exit at high multiples is you don't have to be there for it to run.
The business shouldn't miss a beat after the sale.
100%.
Because of you.
Yeah.
And
a lot of guys don't realize that. You establish yourself to scale, but in order to set the company up for that, it takes years to establish that. Because you do sooner than later, in order to start it and to run it, you have to get in the weeds. And the hard part is getting it to the point where you didn't. Because then what's going to happen is you get out of those weeds, and it's going to find a 20%, if you're doing good leader, you're going to hit 20% failure as you get out of the weeds. And it's going to be bumpy.
Yep.
But then all of a sudden, as long as you put the right who's in the seat, that thing just cranks it.
And people sometimes get caught in this cycle of, well, hold on, if I pay this guy 100 or 200 grand, man, that's hitting my EBITDA, that's messing up my multiple.
You're investing it, though.
It's like, hold on, it's not an expense, it's an investment.
Yeah.
And when you're thinking of exiting, that has to be the mentality, because you'll get that tenfold.
They're going to cook that anyways, right? So it's like if I'm acquiring a company and you're not taking a good salary based off the position, I'm going to take that off your EBITDA anyway. So
they'll
it's like
normalize the numbers.
That's a much better, appropriate way to say it instead of cooking it.
No cooking the books. We're just going to normalize the numbers.
We're going to normalize the numbers. We're going to say, oh, you weren't taking a salary? Well, you should have been.
Right.
Because now, regardless, it's hitting you on your value.
That's right.
And so, and that's another thing that, like, pay yourself, man.
Right.
If you're going to do the job of a CEO, pay yourself the salary of a CEO.
And there are times where sometimes someone's paying themselves $500,000, but the role is really $200,000.
Yeah.
So you normalize down to $200,000.
Which doesn't make any sense. It's like a whole sidebar. Why would you pay yourself the $500K? Because you're just paying way more in taxes than you need to.
Right.
Get the dividend distribution, or even an intercompany loan, and put it in an asset and put debt on it.
There's a lot of ways to set up the business. And one thing on that too is there's not just the operational setup that we just talked about. There's tax impacts, right? Are you a C Corp, an S Corp? The things you need to set up sometimes do take time because the IRS doesn't let you just flip it over kind of thing, right?
It takes at least 2 to 3 years to shut down a company.
I saw a guy pay an unneeded $4 million to the IRS because of poor setup on something that could have been even handled 6 months before the close.
100%.
Cost them $4 million to the IRS. So the idea of a net proceeds analysis, I'm going to sell it for $10 million, but based on my tax structure, based on what's on my books.
Yeah, we could get
into a
whole chat just on structure. We've done it before, actually. With my attorney, and we talked about because we'll do these triple.
All that matters, right? So when we talk about setting things up, those are the implications.
Yeah. So we got to get to the Q&A, but I do want to get to this because it's super important. So you have just done this thing. You've worked XYZ years. You've done a 300 to 400% increase in valuation. The deal's over. The next day you wake up, right? What do you do? Like we had Ben Zobrist and those guys here, my buddy John, and them are super tight on this. And we were talking to Ben, who's baseball. You know Ben, right?
Oh yeah, I played baseball.
Yeah.
Ben's amazing.
Yeah, Ben's the man, right?
Yeah.
So Ben and John, they have this thing called Champion Forward that they just started. And John Harrison, and it's like one of my really tight buddies, and him and Ben are like best friends. And so we hosted them here, and Ben was talking about this thing, and I'm just kind of prefacing it because you kind of have this as a recording artist, as an athlete, as a special ops, right? You're working all this stuff, and when Ben finished winning the World Series for a second time, took the MVP, he like fell into this crazy season. Yeah. Is that something that happens with CEOs of private equity deals and stuff like that?
I would say CEOs and founders, and it's very real. We tongue-in-cheek call it founderitis.
Okay.
But there's a realness to the emotional.
How do you overcome it?
You know it's coming.
Okay.
And you set up people around you. This is where community can come in. So, for example, I have a CEO coach. My private equity group offered it as a benefit. I said, I love that. I'll take full advantage of it. That's where I talk about these are the struggles. How do I prepare for this? Founderitis is real. Sometimes it's seller remorse right after a deal. Like, what did I just do?
Yeah.
And they get over it, but it's a reaction. It's an emotional impact thing in your life that to some of these owners, they identified in their business, and all of a sudden they don't have that, and they're wondering who they are.
That's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
People. So what do you do when your identity is found in what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, I hope it's not, right? This idea of stewardship, like I think we're given relationships and business to manage well. That's more where my faith comes in, and that's how I think about it. So when that goes away, I'm like, okay, what's next, Lord?
What's my my purpose is not the vehicle that I'm driving.
Yeah.
Is what I talk about.
So for me, I love having kingdom impact in the marketplace. Where I'm at is less a part of that.
The cash is the reward to just living a diligent life.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's just fuel to do more.
So how can we speak to those young entrepreneurs and seasoned executives? Because I know me and you where we stand on this. Like I could lose everything and it wouldn't impact my joy.
Right.
The circumstance like that. And we have lost. I mean, you've had things and hits and things like that. So how could we encourage guys that are going to do major exits and major things or have gotten major hits right now and they have said, because your identity in your business, you don't just set up and say, I'm going to put my identity in this thing. It sneaks up on you because you don't have intentionality of letting it not do that because it's all-consuming passion. On our date nights, I had to set rules to be like, we're not going to talk about the business because my wife just knows that when you get your hands and your eyes onto something, it is all you talk about.
Yeah.
And so what makes us successful is our passion, or else we wouldn't be successful.
That's right.
Right? So how do you encourage someone who's now that snuck up on them? They didn't have the protocols in play.
Ideally, it doesn't sneak up on them.
It has snuck up on them. How do you help them?
So you absolutely, I would even say you find a professional. In my case, I have a business coach, a CEO coach, who's been a VC-backed, private equity-backed CEO, been there, done that. That's just who I'm connected with, thankfully. And so they could speak from experience. But I lived it. When I was at University of Tampa, we were number one in the country all year long, multiple seasons, should have won a national title, came up short in the final game one year. And then all of a sudden, my last year, the game was over. And I said, hold on. What I've been doing my whole life as a 22-year-old kid, I'm like, it's done.
It's over.
I knew I wasn't going to the big leagues, and it snuck up on me.
Yeah.
In a very surprising way, because I think I had some identity in that. So it's almost unavoidable. So speaking about it as much as you can on the front end and or in real time, knowing it's unavoidable, and it's just part of. It's similar. I've heard psychologists describe it as it's similar to the grieving process, like losing a family member.
Like death, yeah.
And the whole analogy of, it's your baby and your
My mentor calls it death of a vision.
And
when it's over, it's over.
And I think, again, I only know how to juggle things through my faith walk perspective, which already tells me I don't own it. So that is what works for me, where I just know I'm a steward of something during a set period of time, and I do my best with the skills God gave me, and then the outcome's the outcome. But then my joy and my identity's not there. Easier said than done. But you have to surround yourself, whether it's community or professionals, to just talk through it, because it is a grieving process.
Yeah. So first execution is know this is going to happen and hit you sooner than your life.
Yep.
And the game plan is surround yourself with good people and just know it's coming and, put your faith in something greater than your revenues and what your hands can create.
And one thing I would add is, especially if you're an entrepreneur, already build your plan of what's next.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're ready to go do another venture and that's just how you're wired.
But then take a break, though.
Take a break.
Like
I agree.
I've met some guys who will sell a company and make like 40 mil, and then they're just like, next day on there, it's like, dude, your identity's for sure in this because you're not afraid to like.
And make that sure that's part of the plan, right?
Yeah.
My plan is I'm going to take 6 months off. I'm going to recharge.
Yeah.
Spend time with the family. But then I know then a year from now or whatever, I'm wanting to do this.
Yeah.
And that gives you a lot of times, if you're wired this way, again, hopefully it's not your identity, but there's still purpose in the work.
Yeah.
So then you have something to shoot for. Kind of creates the hope.
Yeah, it's fun, right? Because it's no longer about the cash. It's about the journey and the drive to always create. I always say people aren't buying goods and services, they're buying solutions for pain points. So, as an entrepreneur and as a leader, you get to just help with people's pain.
Yeah.
And then they'll reward you with cheap currency called cash.
Yep.
But if you can keep that mindset focused, like this is not about the business, this is about the person that we're helping. And that is the great divide, I think, between like in the corporate world and the business world, from solo startups all the way up to the big boys and the big leagues, is like, where is your focal point of your why?
Yep.
Is it on the people and the purpose and the legacy, or is it just simply on filling the bank accounts and enriching yourself and buying another island and a jet?
No.
Right? And that's, so we can that was a good way to end that one, right?
Yeah.
This is a good chat. We're going to open it up about 20 minutes of Q&A. You guys having, well, look, all these people are here now. Look at this. How are you guys doing? You guys ready to ask some questions and engage Josh a little bit? We've got a microphone that's coming through, so raise your hand. One right here.
Well, first of all, thank you both for sharing. Thank you for the platform. This is definitely something that's been enriching for myself. I'm also a local Tampa native, went to Tampa Bay Tech as well.
Yeah.
Football.
There you go.
But my question specifically is on the strategy side of things. Remember, you spoke about the math, right? And doing bolt-on acquisitions to be able to do 1 + 1 = 10. You remember that point in the conversation. So as I understand that process, just correct me if I'm wrong, okay? So I wanted to acquire, let's say, a plant business for $1 million. And I know horizontally integrating that is maybe like a distribution. So maybe acquiring like a trucking company. So I will buy that, buy that plant company plus the trucking company, and now resell the entire portfolio for the 10x or for whatever, higher multiple.
Right.
But did I understand, was that, obviously that's a simple example, but from like an analogy and strategy standpoint, did I understand that point correctly when it came down to the bolt-on acquisitions and being able to scale the portfolio and sell the portfolio for a larger gain in comparison to selling it?
I think it's a good analogy, and I think another example might be you own a plant business that's already got distribution. So more of the bolt-ons is I'm going to go buy another plant business and another plant business and another plant business, because it's either giving me market share, or now that I have such size, the competition's buying that plant for $6. I'm buying every one of those plants for $2.50, and now all of a sudden I'm making more margin, and I already have the distribution.
So the differentiator was the distribution, the strategy,
Yeah,
execution.
So the bolt-on to me is more of you're just buying a lot of the same type, and you're using your economies of scales to drive more margin. Now, one thing that's key, and we didn't hit on too much, is the financial modeling is where the gold is at. And this is where the private equity guys bring a ton of value to me, and we have a deal team around this. You have to know your numbers in that 1 + 1 = 10. Because what happens is guys just think it. They don't put into robust Excel sheets or financial analysis. And 1 + 1 was never going to equal 10, right? And you figure that out through your modeling. I have a good friend right now who's looking at a major differentiated acquisition, and they're struggling through the value. And I kept telling them, build the model, build the model. You cannot see it clearly unless you model out the numbers. Let the data do the talking. Don't let anything else tell you what the answer is. The model will show you if there's synergy there or not.
Yep.
So make sure that happens in the process.
Yeah, we do the same thing in real estate. It's just called pro forma. So
Yeah,
we put
that's right.
together
Same
the
thing.
model of, then we basically see if the deal itself can perform against high levels of stress. Right.
That's
A
right.
lot of times, like what we'll do. So, okay, today's market cap rate is 4% on this asset. Well, what happens if interest rate goes up? We'll never do that. We'll just play it.
Yeah.
What happens if it runs at an 8 cap? Well, that's 44%. It doesn't work. I'm not comfortable with that.
That's
right?
right.
And then it literally just happened.
Right.
All these deals, and you're like, well, if we would have modeled it this way.
That's right.
And so the reason why I think pro formas or modeling works is because numbers never lie.
That's right.
And it takes the emotion out of it.
Yep.
Because emotion is actually the first thing that'll get you the best deal, the most profitable deal you ever do is the one you never do.
That's right.
And you said that. I believe that in our real estate business. And you just, I just 100%, your pro forma is everything. Like
That's right.
And I'm very sure they're similar. When we're doing like an institutional deal, or it's like they're 20, 30 page spreadsheets.
Right.
They all communicate to each other.
That's right.
And you
It's
plug in a
robust.
variable and it goes.
And if that's not your skill set, find someone that has
Find
that
a who
skill
with
set.
it. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good question.
Great question. Raise your hand. We'll drop a mic. Other questions? Davis.
Thanks so much. This has definitely been beneficial. And earlier, you really were breaking down culture. And I would love to hear a little bit more in regards to some examples of when the culture just wasn't right. And then how you know how to either build that so you can make it more valuable, more valuable for the company that you're looking to acquire, but making sure that the culture is right for what it is that you're trying to acquire. So I would love to hear that, a little bit more about culture and what you really look for and some of the details in culture when it's on or when it's off.
Yeah. I'll try to give a simple example because it is a soft thing and it's hard to wrap your hands around it. But what we commonly saw in our acquisitions is we had done deals of all sizes. So sometimes bigger companies worth 100 million, 150 million. But then we're doing this bolt-on that we're buying for 10 million. And so just by the nature and the size that these were, you had one that was much more, even though I think this is a curse word, corporate. They were corporate in their approach. They were more like Oracle or SAP type. We're going to do this. This is how we're going to run our product management of this. And then you have this other group who's like, hold on, no, we're like super entrepreneur. We're fast. We're nimble. We were catching these guys all day long because we were moving at 10 times the speed because of our nimble entrepreneurial approach. Those two things are very common examples that generally don't go well together. So then you have to figure out what is workable here. Is there a hybrid? Maybe yes or no. Do you just let them run in a silo, let your product people do it this way? Or if it really needs to come together, that's when you start to say, well, I think this is going to be a mismatch. We've had companies that are much more purpose-driven in their core values and what they want. And if they feel we're coming in and this is just a money play, and all of a sudden we're just going, no, we're going to buy you and then we're going to grow you and sell you, they're going, hold on. All this purpose of who we serve and what we care about, that doesn't work. And the reality is it does not work. Mm-hmm. And so you don't want to do that deal. The leadership side and doing interviews throughout the process with the leadership side will tell you a lot. Sometimes we've used assessments. I've used Strengths Finders. I've used Berkman, Hogan's assessment. All these things really get more psychological into how people think and do things. On a bigger deal, I would say those are valuable. But it's still a hard thing to figure out. But it is one of those more common deal killers. Trying to think of any other examples. But the corporate versus entrepreneurial thing was very common. And the idea of purpose versus just financial, right? When people think private equity, like, oh, this is just spreadsheets and dehumanizes things. And if these people are very caring about their customer and their staff, they're going to feel that that's a disconnect, whether it is or isn't.
Absolutely.
Fantastic conversation today. This has been great. I'm in the healthcare staffing space, and I want to just get your thoughts too on, organic growth versus the M&A. So sometimes for us, it's like, well, we can spend $3 million and build it, or do you spend $3 million and buy it? And just how do you guys, look at those two options and weigh the value of a deal to say, if it's only $500,000 to build it, it might take, an extra year or two to get the EBITDA, or, you just spend the extra $2 million to buy it.
Yeah, the whole build or buy conversation, I could tell you, is very common as you sit in a boardroom and you're going build or buy, build or buy. Generally, I've been a part of more of the speed matters, and speed's a competitive advantage, so go buy it in that particular context. But you bring up a really interesting point that I didn't hit on. When it comes to exiting, a smart future buyer is going to look at your growth and say, was it organic or inorganic? The inorganic growth can get you of certain size to where your multiple's bigger, but if you haven't been growing organically and their deal is going to stop doing the M&A, they're going to discount your business in a big, big way. So what I generally have experienced is the organic growth is what drives your multiple. The inorganic plus organic is what just determines your size of that multiple. So when we last sold for almost $2 billion, the story we heard was, if you're not at least at 10 to 15% growth, you're probably a 14x. But if you're over 10 or 15% growth, you're probably closer to an 18x. So that's a huge number in the valuation around organic growth. And so the organic drives the multiple size. That's the future confidence they have in the business. And the inorganic just helps you get bigger, and ultimately you get a tap onto that big multiple at the same time.
So it's a cadence.
Yeah.
A dance. You have to have them both running simultaneously.
When I say puzzle, this is more
It's a
what
puzzle,
I mean.
yeah.
All that to say, don't at all ever neglect organic. That's a little bit of a kiss of death.
Great question. Solid question. Let's keep them rolling. We got a couple more minutes. This is like the meat where you guys are throwing things out.
Thanks for coming, guys. I appreciate it. This is more, I guess, on the personal side, if that's okay. You don't have to go into details. I get it. But this is kind of like, out of what you said, using that large chunks of time to recharge, like you did a big deal, and I can appreciate you sharing that. That is very important. But again, you said we steward everything that God gives us, right? And the time with our family is one of those things. How would you say that balance looks like when you're stewarding time in the business and also stewarding time with the family? I don't know if my microphone's on.
How do you prioritize the time in the
I
business?
guess I
and
wouldn't be
the
part
family?
of it, but like, how did the stewardship behind it, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the thing that
How do you steward it?
Yeah.
at a high level, because
All
I
the
guess-
things.
all the things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
life
there
and
isn't really a
business.
balance in a
Yeah.
sense, but there's a way of like qualitative, showing like there's more quality in certain time. I understand that, but what does it look like from your end? What have you found actually derail that? Because
man.
that could be a big one.
So-
I'll jump in this too, man.
Yeah,
for sure,
transparently,
Yeah.
I would self-describe myself as young and dumb early on. And I was that high achiever, competitive. Competition's my number one strengths finder, right, in that assessment. So I wanted to win. And so no one was asking me to work at midnight or 1 a.m., but I was. Well, finally, my wife's just kind of saying, hold on, this isn't healthy. Thankfully, she was right. Going into this new role, a couple things we've had to talk about in a very aligned way. One, I do believe that as business gets larger, things get easier. So things get easier with size. You have more of an infrastructure under you to give you that margin, and you have to be just as strategic on that as you are on the business. My wife and I, as I accepted this new role, again, this is $1 billion software company. The demands are going to be real, but we literally sat in front of a campfire at my house and wrote down the non-negotiables.
Absolutely.
And said, and it was one of those, you probably had those conversations with your spouse where you know she's dead serious about this, so it's a covenant. You're not breaking this. So those things we've already talked about. And there were a handful that were very fair. Certain levels of travel, when the cell phone shuts off, when I'm engaged with the family at dinner. Her and I have a Sunday afternoon date, but it's not your traditional date. We generally have church in the morning on Sundays, but then we go out to a lunch and we bring our calendars. And we're literally saying, hey, I have this going on and this going on. And that creates the unity and the teamwork that her and I have strived for. What really bothered her earlier on was when she was surprised by by the way, I'm going out of town tomorrow. And she's going, well, hold on. I had a hair appointment and I thought you were going to at
Watch
least be
the
around for
kids,
the
yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
And that wasn't fair to her. So the communication and the strategy, we literally, my wife didn't appreciate this at the beginning of our relationship, but she really does now, is I'm just as strategic in running our relationship and family dynamic as a business as I am in business, because that's what I know. So we have a strong plan, which is highly communicative and very much let's divide and conquer this together and be on the same page so expectations are crystal clear. And it's not perfect, and sometimes things come up, but the relational credit is there because we built it by being this strategic about it. So when those things come up, it works itself out. But otherwise, we're aligned.
Yeah, and obviously, principally, I have very similar things. And what I do is when our non-negotiables, I put, there's like Armageddon positions, right? Where I'm listening to my wife and her emotions and what's going on. And it really does come down to the choice of, am I going to choose my professional business over my wife and my kids? And before you start going, you set up your non-negotiables between yourself, right? And there's a story where my wife was extremely overwhelmed, had some trauma from our last pregnancy with, that she was supposed to die and all this stuff happened. And I was running a startup, and it was very hard, and I'd gotten off of my controls because you just get this passion. I started showing up late, 6:30, and staying on the phone for 30 minutes in the driveway, these different things that I still will do on occasion, but it was just happening all the time. And it hit this tipping point where she was just like, I'm done. I can't do this. And for that short period of time, because it's not if, it's when you mess up, and when because you can't balance these things. That's what I talk a lot here. There's no such thing as work-life balance. There's a sequence of prioritized decisions based on the season of life you're in. And it hit this point where there was this tipping point where I had to make the decision where most men, because they hadn't thought about it, but I said, my wife's just being emotional. She'll get over it. And it was true. She would have. But I thought the cheapest time this conflict is the moment I can discover it. And she just set a red flag code to me. So what did I do? I cleared my schedule. And for 4 hours, my company was shut down and dead to me. And I even told her that. I said, we'll just shut the company down now. If we need to create an Armageddon, and what happens when you are loving your wife in that way, and when they become that priority, and it truly means, and she knows that you're serious. It only took 3 hours of my life. And it's helped her and supported her, but there was that time where I truly said, it doesn't matter what's going on today.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter. There could be millions of dollars at stake, and you know what? Today, because there is this code, this red code, because you can't think emotionally and logically at the same time, so no matter amount of planning and execution, all this stuff with our wives, will ever be able to fully support that red line emotional code.
Yep.
That just goes, if I ignore my wife's heart, and I continually do it, it will create a negative dividend, an infection that I will pay for 20 years down the road. And so for me, that's my position. I was like, you know what? It's an instinct too, but it's like if my wife ever, and it's just these little minutia, these 1% things, you never let it compound. Because at the end of the day, I don't know how many men who have lost their wives, lost their families, and they got a fat bank account, and they go, man, I would trade this business, this status, if I could have just gone back 15 years and listened to that. So that 4 hours, paid me dividend.
Yeah.
I'm pretty extreme when it comes to that. And a hard line for me too is I just structure my company where I won't miss kids' functions.
Yep.
Just won't do it. I was like, my kids are the most valuable relationships. So is my wife. And so I hope that.
Yeah.
There's just you got to set one of my.
Well,
mentors,
and I've lived
get
both
light
ends of it.
switches.
My wife is incredibly supportive, and like I said, we are strategic around how she handles and navigates things, so I can do my things.
Yeah.
But I've seen both ends of it, and those both ends are when I don't pay attention to that, she rightfully so becomes incredibly bitter.
Absolutely.
Of my role.
We know both of our wives.
Yeah.
They're amazing. Like
Yeah.
we couldn't be where we're at without our wives.
Yeah.
And so it's not like they're very clinging or needy. Like they are sacrificial to let us do what we do.
And then the other side of it, when you're fully communicating and you're strategic and you're really intentional around it, it's a beautiful, supportive thing despite the controlled chaos that we live. Because it's a chaotic
It's complex. Yep.
And but then you still have the full support of that. versus literally if you don't take care of it, it is a bitterness that is deep rooted and can end marriages and or just doesn't work.
It just shatters everything.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good question.
One or two more. Yeah, solid question. Yeah, very straight to the heart on that one.
Last question, and it's in regards to starting with the end in mind that you both alluded to earlier. So I know in the real estate industry, if a deal goes bad, and if it's dead, we can sell the note on a secondary market and kind of free up that cash flow or can free up that debt to do whatever is needed. But in the M&A game, is there like similar strategies that that can be done if a business is like not profitable or is on the brink of like a failing? So I guess like a bailout plan.
Yeah, I think a little different to real estate. The market moves slower in real estate, even though no one expected interest rates to move as fast as they did and maybe put brakes on the market. I don't think there's the bailout plan that we would all love. Sometimes you just got to take your lumps, but it goes back to failing fast. If you have a bad deal, there is generally a buyer that maybe doesn't pay quite what you would have paid because you were baking in some synergy and upside and premium as a result. But there's still a lot of cash out there for companies and private equity especially. So you take your lumps and you move on, but you could still avoid the catastrophic loss. You might have to take a 20% hit on something, but
I mean, some of these guys are taking some. I heard a story the other day. Some of these.
There's been some huge write-downs
They
and
just
like
took, I mean, like a
massive.
yeah, we probably know the same one where they sold. It was nuts.
And there are some big
Yeah.
ones, right? And those
Yeah.
those obviously hit the news, and those are bad deals, right? They risk reward a little bit, and sometimes you do take a bad deal and it's impactful. We've seen some big like billions of dollars in impact on some of these deals lately.
Yeah, some market shifts. Interest dictates value, and equity and assets. Just what it is.
Yep.
And interest markets, the bank system, all that stuff. Yeah, if you don't have your goal is to control the impact of that lump.
Yeah.
It's not fatal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that's where all the pro forma assumptions come in. You bake in a lot of the what ifs. So you stack the odds in your favor. You can still assume all the 10 different things that might go wrong and still make the deal work for you because it's a potential thing and you just structure the deal to protect you. That's where the PE guys get smart and bring a lot of value. You want to plan for those potential downfalls so you don't take too big of a hit.
We got probably one more question if anybody's got one.
Thank you for the conversation. You'd mentioned AI earlier and had a smile on your face. Have you seen any impact that AI's had, like in the franchise model in PE or just any other companies you've worked with?
Oh yeah. The more common that I see is here to stay is probably deal analysis and deal underwriting. So it's very common to have a CIM, a confidential information memorandum. And AI can ingest that with your model behind the scenes of what you like to see and the different metrics or ratios you like to see. And so the idea of qualifying a deal or disqualifying a deal quickly with AI for sure. Mm-hmm. So we see where that's happening, deal analysis, just financial analysis, et cetera. AI in the just franchise world, I would say video creation, marketing content. We were looking to redo our training videos for our franchise network last year, and we were getting quotes 50 to 60 grand for every 6 minutes, 10 minutes of video. We're looking at platforms now where you can text, meaning type, your script to AI, and it's creating it in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's also layering in things that you can copy and paste that we'll use as context and create these videos. A license for that was $6,000 a year. One person doing that could probably recreate 60, 70 videos. So the cost comparison on that is literally a fraction or 1% of what normal video production is happening. There's also a lot of AI that's assessing your SEO strategy and then running out in the market and seeing what the best ones are doing and essentially rewriting your SEO and your back-end algorithms for Google. I mean, it's just the amount of data it can consume, and then the generative AI part is very real. And a couple takeaways as I see it. I don't think AI will definitely replace some jobs, but it's not going to replace all our jobs. But those that know how to use AI will replace your jobs because the prompting and how to use the tool, it's just a tool, right? And then it's here to stay for sure. And the speed of change is going to be insane, and it's going to start creeping into every kind of market. Right now, marketing and deal analysis are the most common I'm seeing, but I could see it really stretching its tentacles everywhere.
That's awesome. Well, Josh, thanks for hanging out. Again, this is Josh Weis.
Thank you, guys.
He's the man. Our next chat, we do these the fourth Thursday of every month. And then we're going to get in the weeds on actually how to develop systems, build systems, the infrastructure, like your gears and your companies and how to grow.
Nice.
So, but thanks for being my guest and just being a good friend. So we'll hang out. And if you're not a member of CRES, I'd love to connect and chill and just to learn about you, see how we can support you and help you. So thanks for coming.
See you.
All right, see you guys.